Hi everyone, my name's Ultramandius, and today I want to talk about what could be done for Swamp Thing in live action. Swamp Thing was created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. He first appeared in House of Secrets issue 92 back in July 1971. Not long after that, he got his own solo comic in Swamp Thing issue 1 in November 1972. Almost a decade later, in 1982, Swamp Thing made his live-action debut on the big screen. The first was Swamp Thing, 1982. It was produced by Swamp Films, DC Comics, Embassy Pictures, and written and directed by horror legend Wes Craven. With a budget of around $2.5 million, it made only a modest theatrical gross, under $1 million domestic at the time, though it became a cult hit on home video. It starred Raid Wise as Alec Holland, Dick Durock as Swamp Thing, and Adrienne Barbeau as Alice Cable. The villain was Dr. Anton Arcane, played by Louis Jordan, with his henchman ferret David Hayes, Harry, Don Knight, and Bruno, Nicholas Worth. It was made as a low-budget creature horror adaptation to capitalize on the comic's cult appeal and to give Wes Craven a chance to prove he could direct a mainstream comic book style film, blending horror, romance, and action on a small budget. 7 years later came the sequel, The Return of Swamp Thing, 1989. This one was produced by Lightyear Entertainment and DC Comics, and directed by Jim Waronowski and written by Neil Cuthbert. It had a budget of about $3 million and grossed around $5.7 million worldwide. Slightly better than the first film, but still small compared to major studio hits. Dick Durock came back as Swamp Thing with Heather Locklear as the co-star. The villain again was Dr. Anton Arcane by Louis Jordan, now joined by Dr. Rochelle, Sarah Douglas, and a lineup of mutated unmen. It was made as a lower budget, more colourful follow-up to cash in on the first film's cult success, and reposition the characters for toys, TV, and a broader audience, leaning into campy horror comedy, which some fans enjoyed but critics mostly panned. On TV, Swamp Thing had a live-action series from 1990 to 1993. It ran for 3 seasons and 72 episodes, produced by Universal Television and DC Comics, and aired first in syndication, then on USA Network. It starred Dick Durock as Swamp Thing and Carrie Wurrer as Abigail Arcane. The show's head writer was Joseph Stefano, with episodes penned by writers like Tom Green, Carla Singer, Janice Diamond, Mark Verheyen, and Anthony Spinner. Episodes were directed by a rotating roster of TV veterans, including Tom Blomquist, Anthony Hickox, Jeff Whitney, Ray Zabadi, and others. Rather than one single showrunner-director, the main villain was Dr. Anton Arcane, played by Mark Lindsay Chapman, with henchmen Graham Kevin Quigley and a rotating cast of mercenaries and scientists. The series was greenlit because USA Network and Universal wanted low-cost, genre-based original programming to fill their schedule, and Swamp Thing just had enough name recognition from the comics and 2 films to attract a cult audience. Although it never had huge ratings, it built a loyal following as essentially the only live-action DC horror show of its era. Swamp Thing came back in 2019 for a 1-season series on DC Universe. This show was produced by Warner Bros. Television and Atomic Monster, the production company founded by James Gunn, the director behind The Conjuring and Aquaman. Fans were excited because of Wann's involvement as an executive producer. The pilot was directed by Len Wiseman, who also helped set the show's tone as executive producer, with later episodes handled by a rotating slate of directors including Carol Banker, Diron Sarafian, Greg Beeman, Toa Fraser, Michael Goy, E.L. Katz, and Alexis Ostrander. It starred Andy Bean as Alec Holland, Derek Mars as Swamp Thing, and Crystal Reed as Abby Arcane. The villains were Dr. Jason Woodrue, the Floronic Man, played by Kevin Durant, and Avery Sunderland, played by Will Patton. It was commissioned to give DC Universe a prestige horror anchor alongside Titans and Doom Patrol, a darker, Alan Moore-inspired corner of DC Library to diversify the service's superhero lineup. Despite strong fan reviews, it was cancelled after 1 episode aired. The reasons cited were budget blowouts, a loss of expected North Carolina tax credits, and a corporate restructuring inside Warner Media. And there was even an animated error. Swamp Thing, the animated series, aired on Fox Kids in 1991 with just 5 episodes. It was produced by Dick Animation City and created to promote Kenner's Swamp Thing toy line. Those toys first hit shelves in late 1990. The main run was in 1991 to 1992, when the show aired and leftover stock stayed on shelves into 1993 before disappearing. It was directed by Chuck Patton and Dan Thompson and written by Mark McCorkle, Reed Shelley, Bruce Shelley, Bob Shuley, and Michael A. Madlock. Swamp Thing was voiced by Len Carlson, Dr. Anton Arcane by Don Franks, and Abby Arcane by Paulina Gillis. The cartoon itself didn't last long on air, but the toys were considered one of Kenner's most successful DC monster tie-in lines at the time. And beyond his own titles, Swamp Thing has also popped up in cameos across countless other comics, shows, and games over the years.
You suck!
When James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios in October 2022, they promised a fresh start. January 31st, 2023, during their first slate presentation, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, Gunn officially announced that Swamp Thing was on the slate. He described it as a very dark horror story and the origins of the monster who is Swamp Thing. And although it's tonally outside of the rest of the DCU, it will still feed into the rest of the stories. The very next day, February 1st, 2023, Gunn defended the choice when some fans said the character was too niche. He tweeted, "I'm not telling Batman and Superman's origin stories again, and don't put Swamp Thing in the corner. He's an incredibly well-known character with not only some of the greatest comics of all time, but a successful film series and his own TV show." Around the same time, Gunn also revealed that the director James Mangold had personally reached out to him about the project. Well, for starters, James actually expressed his interest to me. Guillermo, who I know and love, did not. And in 2025, when asked about the script's status, Gunn admitted with a laugh, "We talked to James the other day. No, he hasn't delivered a script. He's been distracted with his billion of movies." Back in February 2023, right after DC's Gods and Monsters slate was revealed, Industries outlet first linked James Mangold to Swamp Thing. By April 2023, it was official. He'd signed on as both writer and director. From the very beginning, Mangold's been clear about his vision. In interviews throughout mid-2023, he described it as a very simple, clean, gothic horror movie about this man/monster. And he made it even clearer that he wasn't trying to fit into a shared universe mold, saying, "Just doing my own thing with this, just a standalone." By early 2025, that same message hadn't changed. He was still focused on originality over continuity. It's just a matter of, do we find a way on the page to say something original? Alongside all those comments about tone and style, Mangold began downplaying the role of law in one interview with Collider. He bluntly said, "I'm not that interested in being handcuffed by so much law." And in a broader discussion about franchise filmmaking, he warned the amount of law and Easter eggs and fan service starts to become antithetical to any of this stuff at a certain point. It isn't storytelling anymore, it's large-scale advertising. Meanwhile, despite all the talk about tone and approach, there's still no finished script. Both Collider and Gizmodo reported in 2025 that production delays, combined with Mangold's new Paramount deal, don't bode incredibly well. For Swamp Thing's momentum, in short, he still seems interested, but he's juggling too many projects and fans are once again left waiting. So this is where Swamp Thing currently stands. Confirmed back in 2023, a bold vision laid out, plenty of quotes about originality and a gothic horror direction, but still no script, other commitments piling up, and public comments that make it sound like fan expectations just aren't a part of the equation.
Look at how the plastic cup acts like a boat in the water.
Daryl, you jerk. You're gonna get us in trouble for littering.
Ah, big deal. A plastic cup never hurt anything, did it?
Littering always hurts, Daryl.
Walking!
You kids know that plastic lasts hundreds of years when thrown into the environment.
That stuff lasts that long?
Sure does, Omar. We all have to protect the green and recycle our litter.
You need us to help protect the land and water?
Sure do.
You really that busy?
As a matter of fact, kids, I'm swamped.
In my view, the smartest way forward isn't a giant years away blockbuster, but a practical approach that can build the character's value for DC right now. That means a smaller cast, tighter scripts, and contained stories, whether that's a limited live action series, a darker animated show, or a mini movie. With less money spent on spectacle and more focus on story, DC could develop a Swamp Thing that steadily builds a fan base instead of gambling on one huge release. I'm also a bit concerned about the direction of DC Studios overall. While James Gunn has ambitious plans, a lot of projects announced are still in flux or haven't materialized yet, which makes the roadmap confusing and harder to market. The core main 7 DC heroes sometimes feel sidelined, and characters like Swamp Thing risk being caught up in that uncertainty. As for James Mangold, he's clearly a talented and respected filmmaker. But for me personally, his comic book adaptations haven't felt as fresh or as impactful as their comic counterparts. I thought Wolverine was just okay, Logan didn't resonate with me the way the comics did, and Indiana Jones 5 seemed to underperform with a lot of fans, including me.
Trash!
And to be honest, that concern only grows when I hear how he talks about lore and fan expectations. Mangold has openly said he's not that interested in being handcuffed by so much, and even called excessive fan service large-scale advertising. That kind of mindset worries me, because Swamp Thing is built on rich mythology and decades of layered storytelling. If he strips away too much of that, the film risks losing what makes the character so unique and meaningful to longtime fans. That's simply my own taste and perspective, and I know plenty of people enjoyed those films. It just makes me a little cautious about how he might handle Swamp Thing. With a new surge of monster and creature feature films on the horizon, from fresh Godzilla installments to Universal dusting off its classic monsters, audiences are clearly hungry again for dark, larger-than-life stories. In my view, that makes sooner rather than later the perfect moment for DC to push ahead with Swamp Thing. In a climate where monster movies are finding renewed relevance, a character who blends horror, tragedy, and environmental themes could stand out as both timely and powerful. One of the most exciting names floated recently is Vincent D'Onofrio. He's made no secret of his desire to play Swamp Thing. At a 2024 DragonCon panel, he said, "My comic books when I was a kid were Captain America, Spider-Man, Swamp Thing, and Batman. I would really like to play Swamp Thing." And at LA Comic-Con 2025, he expanded on why. "I've always been attracted to people that are broken, and he's like broken. He's not only heartbroken, but his whole life is broken into a million pieces. And it's like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He's not attractive, he lives in a swamp, it's tough, you know, and he's in love, and that's an incredible thing." He's even tweeted that playing Swamp Thing would be fun figuring it all out, and that the psychological brokenness inside him would be an intense role, the kind I like. Guillermo del Toro has been public about his affection for the mystical horror-tinged side of DC for years. While developing his Justice League Dark screenplay, he told comicbook.com, "I love Deadman, I love Demon, I love Swamp Thing, Zatanna. That's a universe. I'm very attracted to that side of the DC universe." Later in a Reddit AMA he said, "Demon or Swamp Thing mean to me what Batman and Superman mean to most mortals, perhaps even more. Swamp Thing / Abigail love was a great source of inspiration for me." And he's also on record as saying, "I love the entire Constantine mythology, the Deadman mythology, the Alec Holland Swamp Thing mythology." After Del Toro's version of Justice League Dark stalled, Doug Liman briefly came aboard with a completely new approach, publicly affirming he would not use Del Toro's script or designs at all. While Del Toro had envisioned a gothic ensemble centered on Swamp Thing's tragic love story, Liman aimed for a different tone. Concept artist Houston Sharp, with David Mason, created striking concept art for Lehman's version, including designs for Swamp Thing that highlight just how distinct his vision was. Lehman ultimately left when the script never felt special enough. Back in 2010, Vincenzo Natali told MTV at WonderCon, "I'd love to make a Swamp Thing movie based on Alan Moore's classic run of the series." He even tweeted the first 4 pages of my aborted #Swamp Thing script. In those pages, Swamp Thing is depicted as a moss-covered dripping creature coated in beaded moisture and tendrils of green, insects crawling across his body as he drags the swamp floor with him. Over ominous shots of soldiers hunting through the marsh, he narrates his own bond with the swamp, and the pages hint that he was once human, deeply in love and nearly impossible to kill. Before I wrap up, if you want to see Swamp Thing's origin, check out my motion comic adaptation of Swamp Thing 1972 issue 1. I created it using the original comic, composed the soundtrack, and designed fan art posters you can find on my socials. The link's in the description, and thank you all so much for the amazing support on the last video. It means a lot. I'll play the trailer at the end if you'd like to check it out. That kind of genuine fandom, D'Onofrio wanting to play him, Del Toro openly admiring the darker mystical side of DC, Natali sharing pages of his abandoned script, and the 2019 writers earning praise for bringing Swamp Thing back to his comic book roots. That's what real passion looks like. That's the spirit that keeps this character alive for over 50 years. Because at the end of the day, it's the fans who built Swamp Thing, the fans who bought the comics, who traded them, who talked about them in forums, who rewatched the shows, bought the toys, and carried the torch long after studios moved on. Every revival, every reboot, every spark of interest, it's all traces back to the people who never stopped believing in this character. The future I want for Swamp Thing isn't some distant oversized blockbuster, it's something grounded and personal, smaller in scale but stronger in spirit, a project that focuses on character over spectacle, atmosphere over budget, and heart over hype. What matters most is staying true to the source, being accurate to the comics, respecting the lore, and not rewriting or stealing over what's already been beautifully built. Whether it's a live-action series, a dark animated story, or a smaller feature, the goal should be to honor what made Swamp Thing special in the first place, the horror, the humanity, and the legacy that fans have protected for decades. If DC puts its energy into that kind of approach, Swamp Thing can naturally grow, build real value, and reconnect with the fans who've been keeping him alive all along. A Swamp Thing created with the fans, built for the fans, the same community that kept him alive through every dark age, because if there's one truth this character proves, it's that what's grown from the swamp only survives through care, and no one's cared more than the fans. Always.